Hi, Kathy. Very excited. We're here for a Corks and Conversation episode, I'm very excited to talk with Peg Tyre.
I am too. Hi, Christy. It's so great to see you. I am thrilled to have this conversation today. Peg's book, Strangers in the Night, just love this cover, is actually a reissue after 30 years, and I cannot wait to talk to her about that.
Yeah, there's lots to talk about. But first, let me tell everyone a little bit about her. So, Peg Tyre, the best selling author of The Trouble with Boys, was until recently a senior writer at Newsweek specializing in social trends and education. She has won numerous awards, including a Pulitzer Prize, a Clarion Award, and a National Education Writers Association Award. Her book, Strangers in the Night, was just released for its 30th anniversary, and it's a page turner. As described in this Kirkus review, turbulent romance with angry intensity on the details of big city crime and a compelling account of the deepest obsession of police officers and crime reporters, staying employed and, if possible, alive. So Peg Tyre lives in New York City with her husband, novelist Peter Blauner, and their two sons. Peg, it is so nice to have you here with us.
Well, thanks very much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm having a
All
glass of
right,
wine.
so
What are you having, Kathy? Is anybody drinking with me today?
Peg, what do you have?
I'm sticking with tea in the biggest glass known to humanity.
That is
Oh,
a
what a
huge
cute mug.
glass.
It has a big hamburger on it.
Like a teapot. Like basically I'm drinking out of a teapot, but it's so huge.
If you just had the little spout, you'd be in great shape. I'm picturing a nursery rhyme happening.
Yep.
I am indulging in just a little Malbec this afternoon, Christy. So I'm
Yes.
joining you.
Okay.
Awesome, awesome.
Yeah. So let's get started with the
I
questions.
Let's dive in. This Peg, I love this book. I love the whole concept of a reissue, which I know Christy's going to ask you about. But I understand that you wrote Strangers in the Night while you were working as a young journalist, signed uh, very similarly to the beat, similar to Kate, your protagonist, who was assigned to the crime beat. And Kate in the book is experiencing some misogyny, both in journalism and in criminal worlds. And I'm wondering if you were, as you were writing this, experiencing some of the same things. And I ask this question from a really personal place because 30 years ago, I was starting a career in law and I was working as a young prosecutor. And so a lot of this book felt really familiar to me.
My sister. You're my sister. Yeah, so looking back on it, it was pretty extreme. And I mean, I'm not telling you anything. If you were a prosecutor, you know what we went through. When the Me Too movement happened, I was kind of I thought it was kind of worrisome in a way because I believe in due process as a person who believes in democracy. I believe, and I'm sure you do too, as a prosecutor, you believe in due
Yeah.
process
Hmm.
as the cornerstone of our constitutional rights. But dang, the young people had it right. They had it right. Like there's when they were describing what they went through, I was like, that was part of my job description. Like that was part of what I did. That was part of what I dealt with every day.
Hmm.
And I really was so proud of the young people who were just like, enough of this already. Enough
Yes.
harassing women. And really calling people out. Okay, due process is a big issue. Okay, and I'm not going to put that aside. It's central to this issue, but God, it was such a relief to
Hmm.
see
Yeah.
the chapter women working, just the page being turned, right? It's like it's
Yeah.
not acceptable anymore. You can't do that anymore. And if you do it, everyone around you is like, "Oh, you're going to get
Yeah.
Right.
out."
Yeah.
And it's great. I'm so proud of our young women.
Don't you find it fascinating that if you told them your firsthand accounts of what you were going through 30 years ago, the look on their face, like my
Wait,
daughters
what we
are
put
now
up
coming
with,
up
you mean?
and young, yeah, and they're like, really? And I was like, it was so normal that it was hard to find someone that thought it wasn't, and that's just you know, I mean, not quite a generation, maybe a generation. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and also it was really complicated because
Mhm.
some of the people who I know who had reputations as being harassers were also friends of mine and were
Right.
Yeah.
also people who I really loved and respected. And
Yeah.
Mhm.
so it was not as, because you were so in it and so up close to it, and maybe had a part of it was like Stockholm syndrome, that like there was no other way to move forward.
Yeah.
Like it was normalized, and also it was very complex. Like I can't really see the people who were doing that as like bad people.
Right.
They just working under an ancient
Yeah.
and tiresome code of behavior,
Yeah.
and that now has changed, and thank God.
Yeah.
I
So
I
yeah,
just had
so
someone recently say to me, a male colleague, said, I guess this goes back to that Maya Angelou, when you know better, you do better, and you better damn
Mm-hmm.
well do better when you know better. And he's like, I'm not trying to let anybody off the hook, but maybe we'll just didn't think about it. And I was like, well, I mean, it's
It is
fair,
true.
right? That's
Yeah.
fair. It
It is
doesn't
true to
necessarily
an
make it
extent.
right. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but who was advantaged by that? Like, sure, you didn't
Right.
think about it because you didn't have to, because
Right. Why would you want
strangely,
to?
strangely, the guys always won, right?
Yeah.
So
It's
Mm-hmm.
weird,
strangely,
right?
they always got the promotion. Like, strangely, they got paid more. Like, what?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you didn't have to examine it because you were winning. But now there's so many more women in the workforce, and we're so much less conditional,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, it's not the same feeling. And so it's changed, and I think it's great. I'm super happy about that.
Yep.
But it is a little, during the Me Too movement, I did feel sort of these layers of kind of, I don't see trauma, it's a little overused, but these layers of like, I just had a lot of introspection to think like, wow, that that really happened. That really went down. And like, what did you do? You just kept on going, and you tried to find people who were good people and who were safe people and who really cared about you as a person and not as a woman, and weren't
Mm-hmm.
trying to hit on you.
Well,
It's a little different too, being older and seeing, I'm sure it still happens to young women quite a bit. Uh, and I would just say, if there's any young women listening to this, young women, fight the power.
yeah.
You can do it. It's your moment.
Yeah.
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 I
It is.
did
And
find it. Go ahead, Kathy.
I just want to say the one thing they have, and when we know what's happening to young women right now. We know that. But they do have more and better company on their side, which I think is, there is a little more safety in numbers and knowledge, right? And um, I was at a cardiologist appointment yesterday with my dad, and they had the photo wall of all the cardiologists. And my daughter is entering medicine right now. And I immediately got my hackles up because I remember seeing all those photo walls when I was entering my career, and I was wrong. 65% of those cardiologists were women. And when I would have looked at that wall, whether it be, attorneys, journalists, doctors, whatever field it was, professors, it would have been by far a different ratio. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping that company of other women and other knowledgeable, supportive men helps this generation, even though we know they're going to go through it. I hope they have a little more
Yeah.
resolve or skills.
Well, I think they
Thanks.
just
Here's
see a
hoping.
different picture than we did, because they realize now they see there's so much media and everything with Me Too, and just the 100 different channels of TV shows that show jerky guys getting beat down or something. So I think I'm optimistic that they're going to be a step ahead, hopefully, than we were.
I think they're under different pressures, though. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I was never under any pressure to look like a porn star for sure, and like
Oh, that's
Yes.
for
look like
sure.
a Kardashian. Like no one gave a. I mean, looking good was like a problem in my world. Like you didn't really want to. You wanted to look like you were ready for anything, but there wasn't a sense of like the performative, the Instagram moment. You just weren't looking
Right.
for that. There was no camera following you everywhere, or you taking a selfie of you everywhere. So I
That's
think they're under
true.
different pressures, but
Yeah,
Yeah,
because I mean, I almost found it annoying
for
if somebody
sure.
was like commenting on your looks. You're like going, no, I want to be taken seriously, you know? And nowadays it's like that's a part of the package for sure. Yeah. Anyway, well, as Kathy promised, I wanted to ask you about the fact that you published this a few years ago and you wrote it a few years ago, and what made you want to reissue it now?
well, I had the opportunity to do it. Dead Sky Publishing came to me. The editor came to me and said he loved the book and he was doing some republishing and did I want to be included? And I said yes, please. I wrote
Hell
two.
yeah.
I wrote two books in this time, and they really are sort of a time capsule, part of my life that I haven't revisited in a while. Like my life has rolled on and things have changed, and there's been other amazing parts of my career that I'm so grateful for. But this was really fun. It was really hard and really fun and really necessary for me to keep doing the kind of work I was doing. Like I had to have a way to sort of process it. And these books were really my way of like, part of me would just wanted to like help me become less freaked out by the stuff that was happening, and also part of me wanted to shock people and say this is really happening, like we have to talking about crime, like we have to start talking about the way that people are being victimized in our city and repeatedly and over time in high crime areas, and what crack is doing, and getting to see that up close. It was a little like covering a war that you come home from every night. Like you come home at 7:30 every night from the war, and you're just like, whoo, that was a lot. And then the next day you're back in it again. And so it was crazy at the time. My friends were, I was 30 and a lot of my friends were getting married, and I'd have them for, I'd have dinner with them and they'd be talking about, are the napkins going to match the tablecloth and blah, blah, blah. And I'd be like, oh my God. And I'd look down and I'd be like, oh my God, there's like brains in the tread of my sneakers.
Oh my
And I'd
God.
be talking and I'd be like, oh my God, like this is, and I'd be freaking out because like this horrible thing had happened to me during the day that I, of course, was not discussing. And then I would look down and I would see this in my sneakers and just be like, I think I'm going to lose my mind. So
Yeah.
it was kind of a way of trying to integrate those experiences. I need to plug in my computer, which strangely is not. Uh,
Oh, it's
okay,
starting to die.
sorry, sorry, it was falling out of the wall.
Okay.
Oh,
So
good.
anyway, I wrote those books to sort of stay sane.
And how did you do that? I mean, honestly, if you were coming home at 7:30, pretty much shell shocked, where did you find time to write? Or was it like first thing in the morning
Yeah,
just to get it?
yeah. No, I'm not. At the time, I wasn't a morning person because I didn't have children. And also I worked really late. So I would do it from like, I'd quickly have dinner and then work on it from, for the 2.5 hours that I had. Didn't watch much TV. I'm a huge reader, but I just worked and worked. But I had already written like my daily stories. So I was like churning out quite a bit of material at that time. The likes of which, I mean, my productivity was amazing. But if you're so freaked out, like it's not that hard to be productive because what else was I gonna do? Go to the
Right.
symphony? I was so
Right.
like I was a
And
little
you
bit
had
out
to
of my
probably
mind.
get it out of your head before you could even go to sleep. I mean, honestly, I would think. That's how I am anyway. I'm like,
It
oh
was
my
more
gosh.
like passing out. Like I would just work and work and work and then like pass out and then like next day, same. So
Wow.
it was very intense. And the books kind of read like that. They have a kind of intensity
Hmm.
that is very as a prosecutor, you'll understand it. It's just that sense of like you're just in a fast moving river and you're just trying to stay afloat. And that's how it felt at the time.
Well, especially with you know, the crazy level of crime that New York City was experiencing when you were writing this. Like you said, it would just be like an average, how many murders
Nine
a day?
homicides a day. Yeah. So my daily routine was that I would go into police headquarters where I actually had an office. Strangely, there was like a press pen
You
in police
did.
headquarters. So I'd like trundle in and I always call my husband or speak to my husband right before I went in and say, like, what happened in sports? I'm not a sports person. And I'd be like, what happened in sports? And he'd be like, oh, the Marlins pitcher was amazing. And I'd be like, what's his name? Rodrigo. So I'd go in and we'd go up to like the place where it's called Department of Public Information. And they have these clipboards where all the homicides are listed. and I'd be flipping through the homicides trying to find out what my hunch is gonna lead the paper for the day, like trying to figure out what's what. And I'd be like saying to the police officers there, how about that Rodrigo? Right? Like just throwing out some sports thing that I knew nothing about. And then they would be like, blah, 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 but back, talking to me about the Marlins or something. I never had a second line, but sometimes the first line was enough to get it going. And then, so you'd look at the clipboard and you would say, which homicide is going to be most newsworthy? And then you would go get in my crappy car and drive out there and be like, what happened here? And lots of times it was a very unsettled situation. Like it had happened at like 5 a.m. and I was there at like 9:30. And sometimes things were still kind of happening. And sometimes the people who answered the door were the people who the cops were looking for. So there were all kinds of like interesting moments. I remember one time on a Sunday morning, it's always Sunday morning was the worst because Saturday night was always like mayhem.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sitting, someone invites me to their house, very nice person. I realize as I sit down, it's kind of dim. I realize like, wow, this living room is full of AK-47 of automatic weapons. Like it is, they're like everywhere on every surface. And I reach back at something in the couch. I reach back and I realize it's a gun.
Oh
and I'm
my
like,
gosh.
okay. I'm in a very heavily armed crack house. This is obviously a crack kill, a crack related killing. And I'm like right in the center of it. It's just like, wow. People used to say to me, you should carry a gun. And I'd be like, oh my God, that is the last thing I need.
Yeah.
Like in the time that I would be like looking through my pocketbook for like the
Right.
that's the time I should be running away.
Like, should I get my recorder or my gun? I just can't decide.
Recorder every time. Yeah.
Every time.
Well, there are a lot of guns out there nowadays too. That's what's interesting. Like, but it's just not even crack houses. You walk into somebody's house and they could have a lot of guns. It's kind of scary.
Yeah, it's not New York City though, I have to say. New York City, we're not like the rest of the country. Because we went through that and we understood just the toll that it takes in communities. We have prohibitive laws against guns. You go to jail if you have a gun. And I think that's right for New York. I was just talking to someone else, guns mean different things in different contexts. Hunting means something different in different contexts. So I don't really have any strong opinions about that except for New York, where I think guns should definitely be.
Yeah, down here it's road rage. We got to watch out for that and things like that. I mean, it's kind of crazy because, there's a lot of crazy drivers down here. And so now it's like, even if they're crazy, you just look forward and, you're not going to engage because that person can have a gun and shoot on the highway or whatever.
That's super sad because that's super sad, really. That's just a real deterioration of the fabric of our culture because there's a little communication that goes into flipping the bird at someone, and just being like, okay.
Like in New York, that's just like a normal thing, Down
like
here, it could be like a. That's funny. Well, we do have a lot of New Yorker drivers down here too, so that they could be
They're
okay.
Not so good.
Yeah, no, it's a melting pot of crazy down here. So.
And really, speaking of culture and changes, what's it like to have started as a journalist working for papers versus what's it like now in journalism with newspapers, I don't know, just declining in such numbers, in such terribly horrifying numbers?
Yeah, I didn't realize it, but these books are really about the last great days of newspapering. At the time, there was such a lot of updrafts in my industry. You could get fired on a Thursday and be hired by Friday at a better job. So now, if you're a journalist, you're just clinging on to what you can hold on to. And that's, the Washington Post is doing layoffs, I think, next week. It's just, It's just endless. And there was also like old people who worked at newspapers. There were people in their 50s and 60s who like made a career there. And you knew that it's a terrible job and you gave up all your holidays and you scrapped together your life with your family. And pay's not good, but there was a career and there was a career pathway. And man, I just don't see that now. I just don't see that for young journalists. I think it's very hard for them. And it's really become a gay, and also it was a very like college kids and also kids, people who are sort of had blue collar backgrounds. And
Mhm.
I think the journalism was much better because there was an old expression which was tell it to Sweeney, which is like enough of your college BS, like enough of your gender. I've had an editor says to me, enough of your gender studies sophomore year course.
Mhm.
Sweeney, like what does it mean if you have to tell to someone who doesn't agree with you,
Yeah.
right? Who is coming from your plumber, okay? And having to understand that your audience is not just like you, I think
Mhm.
made for better journalism. That said, journalism was very white, and that's changing as well. So it's more there's more people who have less who have had not had a seat at the table, which I think is great. But at the same time, the industry's cratered, and at the same time, it's become to my ear an echo chamber where elite opinions are recited and recited and recited again that not that many people agree with in the great wide world, except a
Right.
lot of people agree with in media circles. And I find that troubling and sad, really sad. It was
Mm-hmm.
different than what I signed up for. And it
Mm-hmm.
was
Yeah.
sad to watch that disintegration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
I
Kathy.
I always wonder. Oh yes, wait. I'm sorry. I won't go
No,
on.
go
I'll
ahead.
stop.
No,
Well,
I
I
was.
just say I wonder
Yeah, go ahead.
what that says about us. I don't know if that's even a question. I just wonder what that says about us when we don't have. Oh, I don't know. I always journalism is a such an important calling and profession, and it's just such a
Well,
attack
yeah, it
at those
became a
roots.
real attack. Everything was fake news, fake news, fake news, and so then
Yeah.
it's just a mess, and it is sad because a lot of really good people went into it with really good intentions, and then they're just getting attacked. So,
Mean, to be fair, it was always a rich man's toy, right? Going
Mm.
back to William Randolph Hearst, right? Like
Huh.
rich industrialists always owned news organs, right? But they
Mhm.
competed with each other, right? So there was two rich industrialists in the same town, in Kansas City, right? The
Yeah.
Daily News and the Kansas City Star, and they would compete, right? So if you didn't like one, you'd subscribe to another. But now we have these huge conglomerates, and we have this huge distance between, I think, what people in the media, the kind of accepted opinions that are kind of allowed in the media, and then what a lot of, and then the very nuanced world that most people live in. So I'm often troubled by it. I'm not uh, um, I didn't want to be an advocate. Like I'm not an advocacy journalist. Like that was never. I'm actually more of an advocate now. I run a foundation, and I part of my title is communications. Like I really advocate for educational equity now, and I do a lot of work in that space. But that's separate from journalism. As a journalist, I wanted to be a chronicler, and I felt like my responsibility was to be as fair and as clear not even fair, as clear-eyed as I possibly could be. And you decide if it's fair, right? But my job was to be as clear-eyed and comprehensive as I could be in the space that I had and the time that I had. And that's when it shifted. Like I used to be on-air correspondent for CNN. I was a news reporter. I wasn't like sitting around like shouting my opinions in
Yeah.
panic. Like I have zero interest in that kind of. I don't even think it's
well, I
journalism. I
don't
have
think
zero
that
interest
is.
in that
Yeah,
kind of.
I wouldn't consider that either. It's more just commentary, you know.
Right. It's just, I feel like the media industry tries to manufacture outrage for profit. And I am, I'm not part of that. I'm not interested in
Yeah.
that. I think
Hmm.
that outrage and anger can be very corrosive, as you were just saying, road rage, right? Like, why is everyone so mad, right? We live in an amazing country. We have amazing advantages. Like, there are people who actually would kill other people to be able to live here, right? And everyone's so mad because there's just this drumbeat of anger and outrage all the time, and people who are like sniping at each other in social media. It's like everybody take a chill pill, like calm
Yeah.
down. Like I've seen what crime looks like. You don't really want, I've seen what conflict
Mhm.
looks like really up close. You don't really want that.
Mm-hmm.
But we sort of pretend that we're warriors, right? We're warriors on social media. Pff, give me a
Oh
break.
God. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
How comfortable to sit at your desk and be like, okay, so I want to segue because I think we need to. Peg, this is the time midway we ask what's called the question in the bottle. It's a question you might get to at the bottom of a bottle, as Christy and I have done many times.
All right. Okay. So, what's the weirdest thing you've ever eaten?
Knowingly.
Either way.
That is awesome.
I would say just the weirdest in general, and hopefully you didn't know it was what it was, and it was good. But
I think that's a question I'm going to ask, like, God, when I get to the pearly gates for St. Peter. I'm going to be like, tell me the truth. What's the weirdest thing I ever ate? Because,
sometimes you didn't
know.
know.
do we really know? Yeah. I actually was just in Mexico City and I ate lemon chili crickets.
Really?
Well, how were they?
Yeah, that's crunchy, crunchy and sort of chili. They were fine. I have a bowl of them downstairs. I brought them back for Thanksgiving since I was hosting. I thought, well, here's my side of resentment to serve up. I was like, here, have some crickets. Like
So they weren't like
piece.
soft on the inside or anything, because that would really gross me out.
No,
If they
they're
were,
crispy. They're fried with chili and lime,
Okay.
chili and lime, or lemon.
I
Something.
could see that.
It was
I
pretty
could see
weird.
it. Yeah,
Weird.
that's
I mean,
weird.
so basically you can just take any flavor combo and put it in a cricket, and that's supposed to make it palatable.
Well, I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of people who use crickets and insects for protein, especially I
Mm.
was in the frontier area between Mexico and Guatemala, like in the Mayan area. And, the people are a lot of people are subsistence farmers there and are farming,
Mhm.
eating a lot of crickets. It's like a pretty
Wow.
standard thing.
It's
Yeah.
like lobster is like a bug in the water. That's what
Better.
everybody says. I
Better
know.
than
It's
crickets.
very, very good.
Yeah, better.
What about you? Where's she going? I've down here we eat a lot of strange things because we have like alligator, we eat that, we turtle, whatever, but conch. But my daughter, when she was in Korea, she ate like the worms, just bowl of worms, and I was like, oh my gosh. She said they weren't bad. She ate the whole bowl. I was like, gross. What about you, Kathy?
It's funny. I just actually told somebody at my office this today that my mother-in-law, my husband's family is from a pretty large ranch in the Black Hills, and so there's lots of wildlife. And my mother-in-law, when my husband was growing up, was prone to, put protein on the table, but would not tell him the source of the protein. And he became very, very skeptical. And so even to this day, he will demand, what is in this? So I am certain that I have, at some point along the way, had some muskrat or some badger mixed in with our chili. So I am in Peg's world. I'll have to ask God that because I don't know, but I am certain and that she has done that. We had a patient bring pies today. A very lovely patient bring our staff a bunch of pies. And one of them, she said, I'm not going to tell you what kind it is. I want you to guess. And I was like, oh, I'm not doing that. I'm happy trying different things, but I want to have the ability to make the choice. So
Yeah.
I don't have.
Did you ever find out what it was?
Pretty sure my mother-in-law. No, I didn't. I came here to do this. So I'll check back in. I'm sure someone else was braver than I was. They're beautiful pies. Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah. Well, that's good. We'll ask later, when we get to heaven, because there probably are some things, even on our, who knows, microscopic things.
All right, Christy, get us back on track.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, both of my parents were educators, so I've dabbled a little bit myself. Plus, I have a lot of friends who are teachers. So, I found that your work with the EFG accelerator that you mentioned earlier very interesting, and I think our listeners would too. So could you tell us a little bit about what it is and how you got started with it?
Yeah, so when I was at Newsweek, I wrote, back when Newsweek was a big thing, I wrote cover stories for them, and we used to do a cover story about Jesus right before Christmas. That was the giant seller, and they would sell all the ads against the Jesus cover. And we knew that this was where the money came from, and it was just a huge seller. It was like always some Jesus related topic, like the secret of Mary, or like, Jesus's final thoughts, or something that, I don't know. I never had to write it, thank God. But I wrote this story. I was asked to write a story about girls and education, because they made me cover the education bit, even though I had covered crime and domestic terrorism. Newsweek was in a place, and when I got there, they were like, "You're a girl, you cover education." I was like, "Okay," and so, as one does, and so asked me to write a story about girls and how they struggle at school. And I had read all this Carol Gilligan stuff about how girls struggle to find their voice, and then I looked at the data, because I'm kind of a data wonk, and all the data was like, "Oh my God, boys are really doing terribly at school, especially poor boys, especially rural white boys, especially poor Black and brown boys, terrible." So I wrote this story that said there's a problem with boys in school. And I'm telling you, that cover outsold Jesus.
Oh,
It was like, I'm probably going to get the bolt just for saying that. But like, it was like huge. And I was like swanning around in black town cars, going from like the Today Show to Good Morning.
oh,
America,
wow.
like, talking about this thing, like, and it was kind of a surprise to me, because I'm an ardent progressive feminist, I had to say, this is actually happening. Like, this is actually happening. This is what the data shows. And so from there, I got a Spencer Fellowship at Columbia. They were like, "Come up here to think your big thoughts for a year. We'll pay you." I was like, "Oh,
Okay.
I was like, yes, I will." And I was lecturing all around the country so then I wrote this book based on the cover story. It was a giant bestseller. So my life got really picked up speed. I wrote a second book about education, and then someone at the EGF, the Edwin Gould Foundation, reached out to me and said, "Did I want to work there?" And I was like, "What is that? Like, what kind of job is that? Like, you give away money? That sounds awesome." It sounds like it would take like a day, right?
Right.
It's like, here, I give away money once a month. I have to pay all my bills, but it takes me like 15 minutes. And I didn't realize how much discernment and relational work goes into actually being a good, responsible, generous philanthropist. So they asked me to work at the Edwin Gould Foundation, and we have an incubator for education related nonprofits. And so a lot of the stuff that I did, I've done a lot of investigative reporting for a long time. And so a lot of the skills that I had, which is A, I like talking to people, B, I talk to everybody, C, I ask really impertinent questions and interrupt people all the time. And also, and I guess when it comes to something I know really well, I'm pretty judgy. Like, I'm pretty well read, and I can see where people are falling, where people's ideas are soft and where people's ideas are pretty edgy and exciting. And so we started running this incubator, and that's what I do now. So I run a fellows program for early stage nonprofit leaders, people who have a good idea about how to improve educational equity, mostly in and around New York, but also we've had some organizations that have served as national models for, and have really grown and become national organizations. So it's been a pretty exciting turn. I've been doing that job for 11 years. And for the first 5 years, I did a lot of journalism. I wrote for The Atlantic and Politico and the New York Times Magazine, the New York Times. But it's really hard to do both, really hard to do two jobs. And so and also the media world is really entangled now. So I've slowed down a little on the journalism stuff and spend a lot of time doing the philanthropy work, which I am honored to do. And it's really quite joyous for me and fun, challenging too.
Oh, yeah, I bet. You get to see the fruits of your generosity probably come,
Well,
after 11 years.
To be clear.
Yeah, well, no, I
clear,
know. Yeah, you're going through like grant proposals and things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And and hilariously, if you read this book, Strangers in the Night, and its sequel, In the Midnight Hour, the fact that anyone would let me around sums of money to read those books are hilarious. But I've had these different lives. I've had a really lively career, and I try and say yes to as many opportunities as I can, because why? Because we only get one shot, and
One time, yeah.
And there's times when I've had to choke back because I've had kids, and of course, or aging parents, and of course that's been my privilege. But then there's times where you just have to go for it, and you can go for it, and I try to do that.
Well,
Great.
let's reissue. How exciting is that?
Go for it. Yeah.
I love that. So, one of the through lines I'm going to guess through your many echelons of your career has been writing. You must still, even in your current work, do a fair amount of writing. And a lot of our listeners are all voracious readers, and many, many, many are writers. And so I was wondering if you had any thoughts or advice on writing that you could share.
Well, I do want to say that reading is everything. And it's not stealing if you read something really good and it affects your writing. It's called homage. So you should allow yourself to be influenced. Like, read the best writers that you can. Listen, I like trash too. Like, don't get me wrong. I like a good rip and read. It's like, a little cotton candy, right? But I also try and read the classics. And I try and really sit with the language, and I try and really let the language affect me, and I try and let it affect my writing. I try and also be very curt with my own editing process. Like, if it's not working, it's not working. Okay. Just because you wrote it doesn't mean it's good. Like, nothing good is ever written. It's always rewritten. And so keep pushing to make yourself very precise and make yourself very clear about what it is you mean. And so that has been, and also don't wait for someone to tell you to start writing, because no one's ever going to tell you to start writing.
Right.
Like, you just have to do it. And I think it was Ann Patchett who said, like, it's like when you're writing a novel, it's like, it's always kind of in your head. It's like it's like you turn on the bath water in the bath and you're filling up the bathtub, and you go to do something else, but you're always kind of aware, like, where the level is in the bathtub. Like, that's kind of how it is to be in a novel. You're always like a little part of your brain that's actually over there thinking about the book. And that's just what you have to live with.
Yep. Well, that's good advice.
Thank you for that. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Lovely. It's been such a pleasure, absolute pleasure, having this wide-ranging conversation. I know our listeners are going to want to reach out to you and learn more about you. What's the best way for them to do that?
Well, let's see. I am not a big social media person, I'm sorry to say. I was once, and then I got kind of burnt out on it. I'm on LinkedIn, and my email is pegtyre1@gmail. If you want to write me and tell me how awesome my books are, I would be happy to hear that. Or if you just want
and they can probably find links to all your books, right? On your website.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm also my website is pegtyre.com.
Okay.
But it's easy to find. It's easy to find me. I don't hide.
Okay. Well, and plus we'll put the links in our show notes so people can find you quickly.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been great. Really enjoyed it. So I think we just need to toast to the reissue.
Cheers.
Much
Strangers
success.
in the Night.
I'll drink to that.